This is one of the most outrageous things I have heard in a long, long time.
In a case that has been filled with...
And looks at Wendy and says, you know, you had a great career. Your career is over. It is never coming back. You're done. Why would a judge...
The courtroom was silent, the tension so thick it could have been cut with a knife. Wendy Williams, once the reigning queen of daytime television, sat visibly shocked, her expression a mix of disbelief and heartbreak. Across from her, Judge Lisa Sokoloff delivered words that would reverberate far beyond the confines of that room. Your career is over. It's done. The words weren't just dismissive, they were damning. For a woman who had spent decades building an empire out of audacious honesty and unapologetic grit, they landed like a public sentence, stripping away not only her professional identity but her personal agency. It was as if the gavel had come down, not on a legal matter, but on Wendy Williams herself.
You know, in a court proceeding that has nothing to do with Wendy's career. Moreover, that were made in front of Wendy Williams. If true, that is outrageous because this judge, one, she's not in the entertainment industry, so I don't know where she would get off opining about that and why that's even relevant to her role as a judge, who's basically the judge of the law, and in this case, judge of the...
But why would a judge, whose role is to deal with legal facts, veer so far into the realm of speculative insults? That's the question her fans, her legal team, and even casual observers have been asking ever since. Judge Sokoloff had no background in entertainment, no authority to make sweeping declarations about someone's professional viability. Yet she delivered her grim proclamation with a certainty that felt almost personal. Was this a lapse in judgment, or was there something deeper at play? And why, during the same hearing, did the judge reportedly lash out at Wendy's family, accusing them of being no good? The entire episode felt less like a legal proceeding and more like a bizarre, almost theatrical takedown. The fallout was immediate. Social media exploded with hashtags like Justice for Wendy and Free Wendy as fans and celebrities alike expressed their outrage. Comedians Kathy Griffin and Lunel were among the first to publicly rally behind Wendy, with Griffin calling the judge's comments unprofessional and cruel. Fans organized protests outside Wendy's assisted living facility in New York, complete with posters, chants, and even a petition demanding an end to the guardianship that had placed Wendy's life and finances under someone else's control. The protests weren't just demonstrations. They were declarations of loyalty to a woman who had spent her career giving a voice to the voiceless.
For Wendy Williams, we saw earlier this week fans rallying outside of the assisted living facility where she is staying. That was clearly a big boost to her. We could see that in the video.
But even as the public rallied behind her, Wendy herself was fighting battles on multiple fronts. Days after the court hearing, she returned to Instagram with a bio that read like a battle cry. My career is not over because God is great and He has the last word. It was a defiant message, aimed not just at Judge Sokoloff, but at anyone who doubted her resilience. Yet, beneath the bravado, there were cracks in the facade. Wendy also used her platform to allege a violation of her health privacy, claiming that her medical records had been improperly shared by her doctor with her financial advisor, Lori Schiller, the same advisor who had reportedly flagged her as of unsound mind to Wells Fargo, leading to her accounts being frozen. The betrayal, if true, was staggering. Wendy wasn't just fighting for her career, she was fighting to reclaim her most basic rights, to privacy, to independence, to dignity.
And that you can no longer care for yourself, although you're an adult. Here, what created the guardianship is Wells Fargo, who she had banked with for over a decade, saw some transactions that they believed showed she was being taken advantage of, specifically her son. $100,000 a month on Uber Eats, as one example, and a variety of different
The hell he eating?
I don't know. I was curious. I don't know, did you buy a restaurant?
Right.
But he spent over $100K.
And then there was the medication switch. Wendy alleged that her thyroid medication, critical for managing her Graves' disease, had been replaced without explanation. A nurse had presented her with a pill of a different color, offering no details about the change or its necessity. To some, this might seem like a minor detail, but for Wendy, it was emblematic of a larger issue, the complete lack of autonomy she now had over her own body and health. Who was making these decisions for her, and why were they being made without her consent? Meanwhile, the conspiracy theories swirling around Wendy's situation grew louder and more intricate. Fans speculated that her guardianship wasn't merely a legal measure, but a calculated effort to silence her. Wendy had spent years exposing secrets and scandals on her talk show, earning both admiration and enemies in equal measure. Could it be that her guardianship was less about her well-being and more about controlling her narrative? Some pointed to the timing of her conservatorship, which came on the heels of her public fallout with her ex-husband, Kevin Hunter, and the cancellation of her show. Others noted the unusual involvement of financial institutions like Wells Fargo, which had not only frozen her accounts, but had also petitioned for the guardianship to be put in place. The question loomed: who stood to gain from Wendy's silence?
The judge in the Guardian.
The judge in the guardianship read Alex Finney the Riot Act, threatened her, and said, "You're talking," making an accusation that she's talking to the media, and if you continue doing it, I'm going to do this to you, I'm going to do that to you. There is a gag order in this case. I can tell you that the judge has scared a lot of people in this.
Adding fuel to the fire were reports that the judge had accused Wendy's niece, Alex Finney, of leaking information to the media, an accusation that came with a threat of sanctions for any future breaches. The implication was clear. Silence was expected, and any deviation from that expectation would be met with consequences. But Alex, like Wendy, seemed determined to fight back. She appeared at protests and spoke out in support of her aunt, adding her voice to the growing chorus demanding justice. And then there were the fans. Their devotion to Wendy was unparalleled, and their protests were unlike anything seen in recent memory. They weren't just showing up, they were showing out, with customized t-shirts, elaborate signs, and even coordinated chants. One protester held a sign that read, "Wendy gave us the truth, now she deserves hers." Another wore a shirt emblazoned with the words, "Free Wendy now." The rallies weren't just about Wendy's guardianship, they were about what she represented, a woman who had built her life on speaking openly and unapologetically, now silenced by a system that claimed to protect her.
Now she has retained the services of one Joe Tacopina. Joe Tacopina, of course, the attorney who just got A$AP Rocky acquitted here in Los Angeles in that assault case.
Well, he's one of the biggest and most high-profile defense attorneys in the world.
But even as the protests gained momentum, the legal battle raged on. Wendy's new attorney, Joe Tacopina, entered the scene like a knight in shining armor, promising to take the fight to a jury if necessary. Tacopina, known for representing high-profile clients, brought both credibility and a sense of urgency to the case. He publicly questioned the legitimacy of the guardianship, pointing out that Wendy had passed multiple cognitive evaluations and was more than capable of managing her own affairs.
Yeah, I mean, the end goal is to get her out of that draconian institution she's in, that she doesn't belong in, because she's not incapacitated in any way, shape, or form. She's in a ward where people don't know their names, where people don't know between a red light and a green light. I mean, she's in a place where, people are dangerous to themselves. She's not. She can't leave there on her own to go get a cup of coffee.
And yet, despite the mounting evidence in Wendy's favor, the guardianship remained in place. The judge had the final say, and for now, that say was no. But Wendy wasn't backing down. Neither were her fans, her family, or her legal team. The protests continued, the hashtags trended, and the pressure mounted. It was clear that this fight was far from over. But even as Wendy battled for her freedom in the public eye, darker questions began to surface about the people closest to her, and the ways they may have contributed to the situation she now found herself in. What exactly had been happening behind closed doors in the years leading up to this very public unraveling? And how deep did the betrayals truly go? And just like that, the spotlight swung from the courtroom drama to the shadowy corridors of Wendy Williams' life, where the cracks in her personal world weren't just showing, they were crumbling in real time. Because beyond the protests, the Instagram declarations, and the legal sparring, there was an even darker, more tangled web closing in around her. It wasn't just the courts or the guardianship system that had Wendy boxed in. It was the people who were supposed to love her, protect her, and stand by her. And let's be clear, the betrayal wasn't subtle. It was calculated, insidious, and relentless.
And I'm very confident in my feelings towards Kevin initially, how I felt towards him in the middle, why it took me so long to divorce him.
Take her ex-husband, Kevin Hunter. The man who once stood by her side as her manager and partner in life now loomed like a ghost of scandals past. Their marriage had fallen apart in a blaze of humiliation when his long-rumored indiscretions were dragged into the public eye. And while the headlines focused on his very public betrayal, the financial entanglements he left behind were just as devastating. Kevin had been deeply embedded in Wendy's business empire, with his hands in everything from her production company to her personal bank accounts. When their marriage imploded, so did the trust Wendy had placed in him to safeguard her career and her fortune. But here's the kicker: even after their divorce, the ripple effects of his actions continued to haunt her. as if the man couldn't let go of the empire he had once co-managed. But Kevin's betrayal didn't just stop at infidelity or financial entanglements, it was far messier than that. There were allegations that he used Wendy's own money to fund his new life with his mistress, a life that reportedly included lavish gifts, luxury vacations, and even a new home purchased under questionable circumstances. The sheer audacity of it was almost cinematic. Wendy, meanwhile, was left to pick up the pieces not just of her marriage but of the empire they had built together. And let's not forget, Kevin wasn't just her husband. He was her manager, her right hand, the person she relied on to help steer her career. When their partnership disintegrated, it left a vacuum of trust and stability that Wendy has been struggling to fill ever since.
Accuses her handlers of taking advantage of her wealth, fame, and inability to make a proper decision. He believes her team is ignoring her mental and physical health.
And then came the lawsuits. After their divorce, Kevin filed a legal claim demanding severance payments from Wendy's production company, insisting that he was entitled to compensation for his years of service. The nerve! Here was a man who had already benefited from the success Wendy worked tirelessly to achieve, now demanding even more after their very public split. The legal battle was nasty, dragging Wendy back into the headlines for all the wrong reasons and forcing her to relive the humiliation of their breakup. For Wendy, it wasn't just about the money, it was about the principle. This was a man who had betrayed her trust, violated their marriage, and undermined her career. Yet he still had the audacity to demand a payout. It was a slap in the face, and one that Wendy wasn't about to let go unanswered. But the most devastating blow came when Kevin's actions began to affect their son, Kevin Jr. reports. Surfaced that Wendy's financial troubles had reached a point where she was unable to pay for her son's housing while he was attending college. The situation hit Wendy hard, not just because of the financial strain, but because of what it represented, a failure to provide for her child in the way she had always envisioned. Kevin Jr. was caught in the crossfire, torn between loyalty to his mother and the fallout from his father's actions. It was yet another layer of heartbreak in an already impossible situation, and it underscored just how deeply Kevin's betrayal had cut into the fabric of Wendy's life.
They are lying, and he's claiming they're lying. They're signing her up for projects that she's not ready for, including a possible unscripted show.
And it didn't stop there. Wendy's son, Kevin Hunter Jr., also became a figure of controversy in her financial saga. While fans rallied to her defense, whispers began to surface. Rumors that Kevin Jr. had used his position as her power of attorney to access her accounts without her full understanding. To make matters worse, these whispers weren't just idle gossip. They were backed by court filings and statements from financial institutions that raised serious red flags. Kevin Jr., of course, denied any wrongdoing, insisting that all transactions were approved by his mother. But the damage was done. The narrative of exploitation within Wendy's own family had taken root, and it cast a long, unsettling shadow over her fight for independence. And who could forget Lori Schiller, the financial advisor who had been accused of flagging Wendy as incapable of managing her own affairs. Schiller's role in this saga was murky at best, but one thing was clear. Her recommendation had set off a chain reaction that led to Wendy's accounts being frozen and her life being placed under the control of a legal guardian. But here's where things get even murkier. Schiller wasn't just a passive observer. She was an active participant in the system that had sidelined Wendy. Her claims of unsound mind were based on reports that Wendy herself had allegedly voiced concerns about being exploited. But who were these third parties Schiller cited in her reports? And why did their testimony carry more weight than Wendy's own words? The lack of transparency was glaring, and it raised uncomfortable questions about who was really pulling the strings behind the scenes.
We spent a lot of time with the family, and it really was important to, understand their point of view.
And then there was Sabrina Morrissey, the court-appointed guardian who now held the keys to Wendy's life. Morrissey was supposed to be a neutral figure, someone tasked with ensuring Wendy's well-being and protecting her assets. But instead, her actions, or lack thereof, painted a picture of a guardian who was either overwhelmed or uninterested in actually helping Wendy regain her independence. Reports surfaced that Morrissey had refused to schedule critical medical evaluations, even after Wendy had publicly stated her willingness to undergo testing to prove her competency. It was a glaring contradiction, one that suggested either gross negligence or deliberate obstruction. And the fact that Morrissey was the only person with unrestricted access to Wendy only deepened the sense of unease. What was she hiding, and why? But perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of Wendy's ordeal was the isolation it had imposed on her. Her family, those who genuinely seemed to have her best interests at heart, were effectively cut off from her. They couldn't call her, couldn't visit her without permission, couldn't advocate for her in any meaningful way. Wendy's niece, Alex Finney, had emerged as one of her staunchest defenders, but even she faced roadblocks at every turn. The system was designed to keep Wendy in a bubble, with only her guardian and a select few approved individuals allowed inside. It was a setup that felt less like protection and more like imprisonment. And it left Wendy with little more than her voice and her determination to fight back.
Right?
Correct. He had those tests. She's been deemed she is not incapacitated.
I passed with flying colors.
I know. And I think it's great news, and it's public, and everybody knows, factually that Wendy's not incapacitated.
But let's not forget the role Wendy herself played in this unfolding drama. For all the external forces working against her, Wendy was no passive victim. She was a fighter, a survivor, a woman who had built an empire out of sheer willpower and unrelenting ambition. And even now, in the face of overwhelming odds, she refused to back down. Her Instagram posts, her public appearances, her legal maneuvers, they were all acts of defiance, declarations that she would not be silenced or sidelined. But as inspiring as her resilience was, it also underscored the tragic irony of her situation. Wendy had spent her entire career giving a voice to others, yet now, when she needed it most, her own voice was being drowned out by a system that claimed to know what was best for her. And yet, for all the public support and media attention, the question remained, what would it take to actually free Wendy Williams? The legal system was a labyrinth, one designed to move at a glacial pace and prioritize procedure over people. And while Wendy's new attorney, Joe Tacopina, had vowed to take the fight to a jury, the road ahead was anything but clear. Wendy's competency would be scrutinized, her personal life laid bare, her every move dissected and debated. It was a high-stakes gamble, one that could either restore her independence or cement her status as a ward of the court.
She does not have frontal lobal dementia. She just doesn't. That's something that deteriorates over time, does not improve over time. And from 2024, when she was diagnosed with that, she was under a severe battle of and she's sober now, but look on that TMZ piece that you guys produced with Harvey doing her interview. It was amazing. She was cognitive, she was articulate, she was Wendy.
But here's the thing, Wendy's fight isn't just about her, it's about the millions of people who find themselves trapped in similar situations, their lives controlled by systems that claim to protect them but often end up exploiting them. It's about the broader questions of power, control, and who gets to decide what's best for someone else. And as Wendy's story continues to unfold, it's clear that the stakes couldn't be higher, not just for her, but for everyone watching. So what do you think? Is Wendy Williams a victim of a broken system? Or is there more to this story than meets the eye? Are the people around her truly looking out for her best interests? Or are they part of the problem? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and trust us, this is far from over. Stay tuned, there's so much more to uncover.